Police officers are never short of dealing with danger. We know that injury, we know that police work is a contact sport. We know that our officers will confront those who want to do harm to them. That's a known fact. But what happens when one of our own is hurt or worse yet, killed in the line of duty? Recently in South Florida, we had an officer, a 27-year-old police officer of the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, killed in the line of duty. Devin Jaramillo, 27 years old. He was responding to the scene of a car accident. The unexpected happens. The subject engages him in a violent confrontation. There's a struggle. The officer is then shot. It has sent waves of emotions throughout the community. Today on Bets and Badges, we want to talk about the reaction, the consequences that these type of actions, these type of deaths have on the community as a whole, but also the law enforcement community. I am Robert Asensio, and today we have the great honor of bringing to you Officer Milton Montes de Oca. How are you, brother?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So you and I go way back, right? You worked for the city of Miami. I worked for the school police from the 80s, late 80s through the 90s and 2000s. We had pleasure working together, different types of jobs, probably seeing each other grow. But now, after you left the police department, the Miami's police department, now you're with the Sweetwater Police Department, but you're in a unique capacity, brother. I want to talk about that. You're now a mental health therapist. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. I retired from the city 2017 after 32 years of service. Went into the private sector, did some kind of work that was sort of like in the same wheelhouse. But there came a point in time where I wanted to give back more. I wasn't being challenged. You know, I think that it was an epiphany, if you will, that, hey, you have all these lifespan experiences. How could you share this? How could you make an impact, and not just in law enforcement, with law enforcement? So I decided that I was going to go back to school, and I got a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. I started a private practice where I worked for a private practice where I was very, very fortunate to have a super diverse client population, to include those with neurocognitive disorders, even the LGBTQ community. So I was very blessed with having that. But the grounding was law enforcement, right? That's what kind of made me who I was. So without solicitation, I got a call from our Chief Sergio Diaz from the Sweetwater Police Department, and backed by his staff and the mayor, they offered me a position in the City of Sweetwater to open or develop a mental health component to their training unit, the first and ever there.
Pretty cutting edge.
Yes.
Because most agencies, this is new. This is a new environment. And for the administration to go out of the box, if you will, right?
Yes.
To bring on a person, mental health therapist, it's big.
Yes, I thought it was a great opportunity. And you're right. I mean, there's a lot of peer support groups out there that are outstanding. They're doing outstanding work. But to have actual clinicians on the team, there's just a few. I'm very blessed with being able to contribute my experiences as well as my education to bettering the mental health program in the City of Sweetwater, and anyone else that might want to, get any kind of help from my perspective. So I've been doing that now for a year. It's been very rewarding. As anyone knows, the hardest part, right, is actually establishing rapport, and it's the most important fundamental part of any therapeutic alliance, right? Is that establishing that rapport. And establishing that rapport in the law enforcement culture is not as easy as it is anywhere else, right? And you can attest for that.
For sure.
People immediately judge you. What is this guy really here for? Is this guy trying to find out what's wrong with us so he can go back and snitch us out to the chief? All those things are probably going through people's minds.
Think about when you were a young cop, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's no shame for their thinking, because I, in their shoes, would have probably thought the same thing. So it's taken me a while, and actually it was shorter than I thought. The department is is an unbelievable place, led by great leaders. And I have been able to do that. And through that, establishing that rapport, obviously it opens up, the guys to be genuine when they come to me with some issues. I don't do any interventions, but I do a lot of check-ins.
But talking about building credibility and building the trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we in police work, we don't trust people, right?
Right.
We're cynical.
Yeah. Keeps us alive.
Yeah, but like, how much of that is because you walk the walk, bro?
Oh, absolutely. I think the fact that I come with 32 years of experience, I was a commander of the SIS unit, as you know, in the city of Miami. That gives me a lot of credibility, right? When it comes to where I can really empathize with the struggles that they're going through, because I really have been in your shoes, right? And if we haven't, we know someone that has, right? After 32 years in law enforcement, we definitely have ran the gamut of emotions, right? So that helped me a lot. I do a lot of psychoeducation in the training unit as well, highlighting things that we all go through and maybe they can't put a word to it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I explain to them is, listen, if there's a scientific word for what you're going through, you're not the only one going through it. And a lot of times that's what kind of stigmatizes a lot of cops from seeking help with mental health, right? Oh, how could I be weak when I'm out there helping the weak, that kind of thing. But the reality is that we're just human beings, sometimes asked to do superhuman things.
Yeah, what's interesting is that I was speaking to a neuroscientist the other day, and actually two of them, and they both brought this up the same issue from different conversations or during different conversations, and that's that this piece of suck it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And don't show your emotions and deal with other people's issues. That's unnatural.
Correct.
And that we actually are the process of neuroplasticity, where we are retraining our brain thoughts,
mm-hmm.
something that's unnatural, is what then causes us some bad consequences, provides bad consequences at times, right? Forces us to go into risky behavior,
mm-hmm.
suck it up, and we trying to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So having you on board now, I wish we would have had that when we started, right?
Yes.
But how do you see the officers dealing with how do you see them working through the situations that they deal with? Are they open about it? And are they internalizing it? And then how do you deal with them?
What I've seen so far is there isn't a lot of overt working on it, but there is a lot of, based on confidentiality, there's a lot of openness to actually express what they're going through. And then, back and get referrals, for example, if there's an issue that needs to be really deeply addressed. And I do see a trend where it's becoming a little bit more accessible to them, and also for them to be willing to get the help. I just don't think that they go around bragging about having a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still stuck with that stigma.
Yes, there's still a lot of stigma. It's a very authoritative type of profession where you're constantly, telling people what is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You really think about it, police work, right? That's why when I engage young cops, in an audience where it's a new audience, I always ask them what their name is, right? And what brought them to law enforcement, and what their name is, what they brought them to law enforcement. More than not, the younger cops will address themselves as, my name is Officer James Smith. My name is Officer Maria Perez. My name is Officer Tom Hill. And then the older guys will go, my name is, Martinez or whatever. And I do that for a reason, because I want them to realize that their name is not Officer John Smith. Yeah. Their name is John Smith.
Yeah, but you develop that identity, right?
Develop that identity, but they it needs to be understood that when you go home, you're no longer Officer John Smith.
Which is hard to break from, right?
Absolutely. That's why it's important to get them to bring it to the forefront of their knowledge, right? To understand that you need to understand to separate that officer label from who you really are, and they get it. They really do. They really do get it. Another question that I ask them is why did they become police officers? Why did they go into law enforcement? And for the most part, they'll say, Well, I mean, they have a variety of different answers, right? From, I want to help people to, I like the money, I like the way I look in uniform and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but I nudge them and I nudge them, but what is it about the uniform that you like? And what is the best part of your day? And what has been the most rewarding? I'm nudging them into understanding that everybody joins law enforcement. If you stay here long enough, is because you want to help someone. Yeah. You want to help people, which is a great, great trait to have, which means that you are actually an empathetic individual, right? Law enforcement people are empathetic individuals. We put ourselves in the people that we serve in their shoes and prevent them from being harmed, or if they have been harmed, ensure them that there's someone there to back them up, et cetera, right? Which is a great trait to have. You can't really learn empathy to a certain extent. You kind of have to, you either have it or you don't, right? You either have it or you don't. So most police officers, the large majority of police officers are empathetic individuals. How is that a two-sided coin? That opens you up to experiencing a lot of vicarious trauma, right? You really, really feel for those hard calls that you go to, that elderly person that got mugged, that young person that got molested. You really start to feel for them, right? Yeah. And you start to ingest that trauma, and it surfaces. And if you don't deal with it, it becomes something that we call cumulative. Mm-hmm. Over and over and over, you go to these calls, you're ingesting this trauma over and over and over, and you're not dealing with it. And if you are, you're dealing with it in a not very healthy way. As you mentioned, risky behavior, right? The use of alcohol, extramarital affairs, things that kind of like put your mind at ease for a little while, give you that sense of it's going to be okay, but it's temporary. And these are the things that I kind of try to explain to them.
Is that like a form of self-medication? The risky behavior?
It works, but it works momentarily. It doesn't get to the root of the problem. For those 15, 20 minutes, you're going to be feeling great. You're not going to be remembering all this trauma that you went through, or this trauma that you've vicariously ingested. It's going to work. Mm-hmm. And that kind of like makes you want to do it over and over and over. But what happens?
Especially in this environment where you're chasing a high. Exactly. The danger is a high, right? So you confront yourself, you put yourself in these positions of going after the bad guys, if you will.
Yeah. And so, it's important. And to be very honest, it's almost promoted, right? In the law enforcement community. Hey, let's go. Come on, guys, let's go drinking, because, nobody knows us like us, right? The only person you can really be genuine with is another cop, right? That's the kind of mentality that they start to develop, that mindset that's not very healthy in the long run.
Yeah, but think about, what we experience, our family members, let's put our family members in the equation, or a spouse, right? Significant other. They don't experience generally if they're not in the business, right? Correct. And then how do we tell it to them? And I've said this many times on other shows, and I'm trying to work through this phenomena that we have, that we feel. How can they understand?
Right. Yeah.
So that's why we tend to gravitate to fellow officers.
They may not truly understand because they weren't there, but if they love you, they'll understand what you're going through, right? Because if you're hurt, you're hurt. My husband's hurt. My boyfriend's hurt. My dad is hurt. They're going to be there to support your healing, okay? Not take you away from what happened, just support your healing. That support system is so, so important, especially in law enforcement, Firemen and law enforcement, first responders in general, we go through a lot of traumatic events. We ingest a lot of trauma, right?
It's a career.
It's a career long, years and years of this, right? However, this is the difference in law enforcement and police work, right? Firemen go to calls together as a team. They come back, they decompress as a team. They always have that support system available to them. Cops, you go to a call. If you have a backup, you have a backup. If you don't, you handle the call by yourself. Whatever it is you saw, you go. For the most part, you're alone, or if you're lucky enough to have a partner, you're with a partner in your car, and that's it. Other than that support system, what do you have? You should have something at home or somewhere a positive support system that you could also vent, because venting is very, very therapeutic. Ingesting it is not. Why do you think journaling is? People talk about journaling. What is journaling? Journaling is actually putting down on paper your thoughts. So it's actually like talking to yourself, right? And then you can go back and read to see where you were during that time and how you progressed or regressed from that situation.
Are you a proponent for journaling?
I am a very proponent. Any mindfulness technique is very, very, very therapeutic. It's not for everyone, obviously. Some people would rather, meditate, or some people would rather just journal. But either way,
It's hard to meditate when when that silence hits you, right? And,
Yes.
and that monster is there.
Yes.
And I mean, for me, the worst time is when I'm quiet, right? When the lights go down and the sound goes off. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Those squirrels begin to work.
Because it's interesting you say that, because our normal is to be at a very hyper vigilant state. That's our normal. But
Which is abnormal.
It's just that's not normal. That's human beings aren't supposed to be hyper vigilant at all times, right? But that's our normal. And a perfect example I use of myself is that I'll go on vacation, and I'll be on a cruise, for example, and I'll lay there on the deck, and I'll be like, okay, what do I do now? What do I do now? Oh, let me get up. Let me get a hot dog. Come back. I'm walking around, and then my wife is like, why don't you just sit down and relax? I can't. Yeah, I can't, because even though I try to, I go, why am I sitting here relaxing? I need to be doing something, and it's outside our actually our mind, but you're just in that constant state of hypervigilance, which is not good, healthy. Even somatically, it's not healthy.
And you mentioned about the rookie officers who generally introduce themselves by officer, and then the senior ones, the more seasoned ones, say, use their name. But I challenge you to jump into that arena where you explore, are they all shaped by their identity of what they're doing? Because it's hard for us to break away from what we've done for so long, and the culture that we've been surviving in, the rules of engagement that we play by.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. It is difficult to separate yourself from your identity as a law enforcement officer, but it's also just as important to be able to do that. It's more important for you to do that. You don't want to be cop at home. You want to be dad. You want to be husband, right? You don't want to be cop at home. It's important. It's challenging. It's very challenging to do that, especially if you do it for so many years. That's why it's important to get to these young officers right from the front and understand that you're going to go through a lot of things that the average person will never, ever experience. And you have to understand that you need to separate yourself, what you are, what you do for a living, okay, to who you are, especially at home, okay, and in social environments, right?
Yeah.
In social environments, because that hypervigilance just kind of, promotes that fight or flight all the time, right? Fight or flight or freeze, now they call it, right? What that does is it's when you're in that state of mode, right? Your amygdala, what does it bombard your body with? Cortisol, right? Cortisol, which is important, right? Because that's what's going to get you to survive. Your heart rate goes up, and you're energetic because you need to fight. You might have to fight, right? But cortisol needs to level back down before it goes back up again, right? If not, what does it promote? Heart disease, diabetes, right? Because you have all that insulin now in your body. So in law enforcement, you might not have time to decompress, right? You just go from hot call to hot call to hot call. So you're in fight or flight for 6, 7, 8 hours. Maybe you get an hour or two to decompress. That cortisol is still rummaging through your body.
I remember you being on those hot calls and handling yourself very composed, in a very composed manner. And I wonder, now years later, how you were dealing with it back then, how it was affecting you individually, personally.
Well, I was dealing with it the only way I knew how to. All that stuff that we talked about, all that, isolating myself from, civilians, developing that close-knit group of friends that are the only ones I hung out with many, many times more than I should have. And, that was it. There was no other escape. There was no, hey, there's a peer support team here that if you want to go and take a couple of hours or whatever and just have a conversation, that didn't exist back then. So all we had was what you just said, right? That suck it up and move on. We got another call. That's all we had. So I think when you're young, you kind of are able to deal with it, right? Because you don't really have that sense of mortality as you do when you get older. And it just becomes the norm. But as you get older, it starts to affect you because all this stuff that you did before, you wish you could go back, right? And undo, but you can't. You just got to forgive yourself for not knowing. And
that's hard, forgiving. What you just said, giving yourself grace to forgive, it's so freaking hard, man.
It is.
For me, I think that result of trauma, I got into a marriage that maybe I shouldn't have, and caused me a divorce, wrecked my family, and I'm forever trying to make up for it, right? And now I'm different relationship. Life is really, really good, but man, it sure took a beating on me.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, but you have to try to understand that if you knew that the outcome was going to be what it was, would you have still done the behavior that you did? And probably the answer is going to be no. If I knew that it was going to wreck my life, I wouldn't have done A, B, C. So how can you not forgive yourself because you didn't know that that was going to be the outcome?
What suggestion would you give to those officers and those people, whether first responders, veterans, community, who are experiencing moments of chaos, turmoil in their life? What advice would you give them to kind of center themselves?
The first advice that I would give them is do not isolate yourself. Do not isolate yourself. We tend to want to do that. Nobody understands me. You know what? I'm just going to go get a bottle of booze and sit at home or go to a bar and just be alone, right? That is the first thing I would tell them. If you're going through some issues that are causing you some emotional distress, then find yourself someone that's positive and have a conversation with them. Let it start there. If you need to further your healing, then I would definitely, promote looking for a mental health professional to actually sit down and kind of guide you, because a lot of times, right, we go to our friends, but our friends are kind of biased, right? They're kind of, they want, if you tell them, oh, my wife is not a nice person, they're going to go, yeah, you're right. Your wife is not a nice person. They're going to kind of be on your side. So that neutral party that can actually look at the big picture and give you some information as to how you should address the situation from an unbiased perspective, I think it's very important. I would also encourage them to understand what actually is risky behavior, right? Because we use that term a lot, but what is risky behavior? Oh, what's so bad about going to a bar and having a couple of drinks with my friends? Yeah. At a glance, it doesn't look that bad. But if it happens 2 or 3 times a week, now what? Are you going to take an Uber every time, or are you going to chance it and drive your car? That's risky. Are you possibly having some marital discord and you meet someone that's a female or someone that you're attracted to at the bar and you're kind of like hit it off with them? That's risky behavior. Are you physically damaging yourself by doing all this kind of stuff? Possible. That's risky behavior. So don't take it at a glance that it's not. Prioritize your life. What is it that you really want? And that number one thing on that list should be happiness. And whatever that means to you is the goal that you should have. Is money happiness? Maybe some people it's more, it makes them happier than others. Is a positive relationship happiness? Well, then work on that. Work on the things that are going to be life lasting, right? Rather than things that are just going to give you a temporary gratification of what your needs are at that moment.
100%. So recently, the death of an officer in line duty, where he was actually murdered by a subject. You said something to me offline which really resonated with me. This one feels different. How is it, for those people that will not understand, our community, accepts the fact that we're in the devil's den, if you will, or danger, right? Our community law enforcement accepts that it's not necessarily if someone gets killed or injured, it's the fact that someone's going to happen. It's going to happen. When will it happen? And we often dismiss it until it occurs, and then we have these emotions that come out. Can you explain to the audience, for those people that would not know, that are not from this community of law enforcement, first responder or veteran community, what it is like to have a loss of a close person you work with, or somebody that works in the community that you work with?
It's a death of a relative. It's a death of a family member. Because although we may not be connected through blood, we're connected through our uniform, what we do, and our community, right? Our law enforcement community, which is a very specific type of environment, right? So that's why I think law enforcement officers take it so personal, it's because it is personal. It's a family member that was unjustifiably murdered, as you said. He wasn't just a line on duty death. This guy was murdered. For what? What could have been the worst outcome? You know, these things start going through your mind. What could have been the worst outcome of this situation for the offender? You know, traffic ticket, maybe going to jail for some traffic related issue. Come on. You know, it doesn't make sense because it's not supposed to make sense. Somebody should not have been killed that way. It doesn't make sense, but it happened, right? And that is where, and it's funny that you mentioned this because it's very interesting. This is where I think everybody is saying it feels different, right? It feels different. And I think that the overarching feeling, and I've had a couple of officers call me, and one particular officer called me and said, man, I'm struggling because I should be sad, but what I am is angry. And I'm angry as well. And I'm sure you're angry because that's a powerful word, right? We say, oh, I'm upset, or all right. But when you actually are angry, it really just hurts you right here in the gut. And that's what the feeling is that anger. That anger is what's giving you that pit in your stomach, feeling the pit of your stomach, right? Because it's anger. And if you go by the Kubler-Ross model, right, the stages of grief, right, the first one should be denial, right? Denial, oh, this is not happening. This can't be happening, right? And then the second one should be anger, right? And then, you know, you have bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance, right? However, it's not a linear path. You know, you could go straight into depression and then at some point in time be angry and then denial. You know, it's not like set in stone that that's the way it's supposed to go down. But for the most part, in our environment, law enforcement environment, it does kind of go that way, right? Oh, I can't believe this happened to this guy. He was a good officer. But I think the nature of how this young officer was killed is what really made a lot of people just angry. And, you know, again, kudos to our staff who actually went out the night of and addressed the officers that were working because, you know, they needed to understand that this was a horrible, horrible thing that happened, but we still have a job to do. We still have to serve the community with the utmost professionalism, and we have to always give someone the benefit of the doubt if it comes to that. Not work on not work the shift based on emotions, work the shift on professionalism. And that was explained to them, which I really give them a lot of kudos for having done that. And it's important. It's important because I heard some people, they would talk to me and go, oh, the cops now are going to be, you know, they're going to be tagging you for whatever. And you better not even look at a cop in a bad way because, you know, this policeman got killed and they're out there hunting for whoever to kind of like displace their aggression. No. Do those feelings surface? Well, we're human beings. Maybe for some people it does surface, right? But for the most part, I could tell the audience that you know, to actually be a law enforcement officer, you know, your primary duty is to serve that community, whether you agree or you disagree. And you, as well as I, we've been to these pro and con demonstrations, right? That you had to pick a side, you would, but you can't, and you don't. You stay neutral, right? So you do the job. And you continue to do the work that you have to do despite of the fact. Now you deal with it. If you're angry, let someone know you're angry. You know, it's okay. It's okay to be angry. This officer was actually kind of feeling guilty that he was feeling angry and not sad.
People tend to forget, even officers, practitioners, tend to forget or take it for granted that not everyone out there is a good person. You know, sometimes my wife and I were talking about this recently. We had a senior citizen that turned out to be a really bad person. And we always thought that person was good. And we could, you know, in our culture, viejito, older person, oh, they look so cute, they're older, they got to be good. Bullshit. A bad person when they're young is a bad person generally when they grow older. They don't change unless they have some level of, self-modification. But bad people are bad people, and there are bad people out there. The question I have for you is, in dealing with those officers, how do you convey to them? How do you reinforce that they got to confront those bad guys and still maintain some level of discipline so that they don't become a casualty themselves, whether casualty of injury themselves, physically, emotionally or career-wise?
It's difficult sometimes, especially when you're dealing with situations that are at any human level very very horrific, right? Such as somebody that rapes a baby, for example, or somebody that just robs and beats an elderly person to almost death just to get a couple of dollars. Those things touch at your heartstring, right? However, this is why we do what we do. This is why the average person will not do this job, because we have to have enough fortitude to be able to say, this guy is going to be put in jail just like he deserves to be, or this person is going to be put in jail just like it's supposed to be, but it is not up to me to punish them. Police officers are not here to punish. We are here to enforce the law. The court system and everything else, those are the people that decide what the discipline is going to be. If you do what you used to call back in the day street justice, you're not. It's just not going to work for you in the long run. It's not going to work for you. You are not here to punish. You are here to enforce the law. And there are people that want to break the law, and that's what you're there for, to keep everyone else that is law abiding safe. I don't know if that makes sense.
So you are freaking hell of a addition to law enforcement, a breath of fresh air, if you will.
I appreciate that. I put myself in a position where I can help to a certain level, right? I don't provide formal therapeutic counseling. I don't do that because it would be a conflict of interest, right? But I do refer out when I see that if there's a need for it. And as any therapist that are watching, they could we have these things called a pre-counseling check-in, right? So you kind of check in and kind of talk a little bit about what's distressing you, and then we take it from there. Well, that's kind of like an informal conversation, and that's what I provide for the most part, right? Do I provide psychoeducation, and in that psychoeducation kind of like gear it towards what is the best scenario to take if this is your stressor in a group setting, in an audience group setting? Then yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people do take a lot of it, because I've had people come up after my presentations and they'll tell me, I never thought about it that way. I am going to go, seek counseling. I didn't, I don't feel that, that I didn't realize that it was so, unrestricted for someone to just say, hey man, I need help. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody needs help at some point in time in their life.
For sure.
Everybody. So whatever I can do for the department or anyone else, I'm willing to do it. I also, am part of the training unit, so I'm out there at the firing range and helping out and doing everything else all the other trainers are at my within the scope of my competency, right? Which I think again adds a lot of credibility to my position there, because it doesn't show them like, oh, this guy's above doing this. No, I'll do whatever. I lift boxes. We just went and picked up a beautiful command post from Pennsylvania. 6 of us drove to Pennsylvania, picked up the command center.
I saw that on the news. It was really stellar.
Yeah, and so more than happy to do it. It was a great experience. We had 2 of our chiefs went with us, our assistant chief, which Frank Fernandez, and our deputy chief Noel Gill, and the assistant chief asked me what was one of the most rewarding things that you got out of this experience, and I hadn't really thought about it, but when the question was asked, I immediately knew the answer, and it was how fortunate it is we have to have this type of leadership, which is why I think that this department is so stellar now, right? These guys would, they'll tell, hey, we got to wash the cars, right? First people out of the cars washing those cars, these guys are chiefs. They can just say, you 2 guys go wash the car. So they were first ones out there. You know what I mean? And so that, I think that alone was very therapeutic for all the officers that went there, because they saw their leadership that, do as I say, not as I do, is not that case. They were actually out there doing everything. And that's healing. That's healing, because when you have that preconception of them versus us, okay, you're not going to go in a positive direction, because there's always going to be that animosity in place, right? So I try and take like every kind of situation and kind of put it in a therapeutic lens to see how it is that this could be affected in a positive way, from a mental health standpoint.
Yeah, man. So leading by example, and for anybody that wants an analogy or drug comparison, law enforcement for me, or first responder work, actually any work that you're dealing with the public or in combat type situation, it's like throwing a person who's injured or will be injured into an arena that they will continuously get cut along the same injuries, right? You'll continue to get that scar is never going to heal because you're going to continuously be impacted, right? It's like when you hurt your finger, no matter what you do, you're always going to hurt your finger, right? You're always going to feel that pain. And for people like yourself, it's good to have you on board because, you're that stopgap measure, if you will, to helping provide some sense of healing. I couldn't say any better. Milton Montes de Oca.
I thank you very much for having me on the show. It was a blessing to be here.
Oh, brother, I thank you. Milton Montes de Oca is a officer that's cop's cop, man. He's walked the walk. I worked with a lot of cops and then associated with a lot of cops. He's one of the ones I can say that, when he talks, he's been there. He's walked the beat. He's done a lot, put himself in harm's way many times that I witnessed. And I'm glad you came out on the other end unscathed or minimally scathed and healing. Thank you, brother. Look forward to the next one.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, to the Miami's Community News team, to our producer behind the scenes, to the Millers, Michael Grant Miller, we can't thank you enough, but more importantly, to you, the audience. We look forward to speaking with you next time, having more of these conversations. You can find us on most podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Amazon, YouTube, our website, www.vetsandbadges.com, or on the Miami's Community News, communitynewspapers.com. Check us out. Join us. Talk to us. Thank you. Until next time.